This week's story comes to us from Jim Winter, author of the Holland Bay series, which includes Holland Bay and the Dogs of Beaumont Heights. Like his series, today's story takes place in what he calls the Celloverse, set in and around the fictional city of Monticello, Ohio. For you Ohio fans out there, this city is kind of situated on the north side of the state, kind of Cleveland area-ish, between Cleveland and Toledo. Very cool series. Read it. You're going to love it. Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All of our stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. Jack and I perform these live, front to back, no breaks, no fakes, no retakes. The rules for law and order create the boundaries for civil coexistence, and ideally the backdrops for individuals, families, and companies to grow and thrive. Breaking these rules puts civil order at risk, and while murder is the big daddy of crimes, codified ordinances across municipal divisions, counties, and states, and countries show the nearly endless ways there are to create mayhem. This season, we put our detective skills to the test. This is Season 8, Anything But Murder. All right, we are here with Episode 9, and Missing Person is the featured murderless crime. This is The Florida Man Cometh by Jim Winter.
All right, so what do you think a good Florida Man instrument would be? I feel like if I could do the jaw harp, that'd be perfect.
This is a very playful story, a little bit capery. So something fun. What is that? I like that.
This is BRTY, capital T sax. British tenor sax? I don't know what the BRTY would stand for, to be honest. What do you guys think? I don't know.
But we're going. I like the sax. We're going with it. Too early for this. Seriously, Constable, Rufus King muttered. Who puts a school bus in someone's front yard? Eric Teasdale, constable for Buckland County, scratched his head and sipped his Monster Energy drink. At 54, he probably should have graduated a coffee, but his misspent youth refused to let go, even with the badge clipped now to his belt. Besides, he needed the jolt. He had come out at 7 in the morning to King's Lake House to see why someone parked a Brandy Buck High School bus in the front yard. Did you hear anything last night? King, tall, black, and looking like Idris Elba if Idris had become a real estate mogul, sipped his coffee and stared at the bus. You know me. I'm a night owl, or I was before Alondra was born. I sleep the sleep of the dead. That Amish guy across the lake started cutting wood at 6 this morning. I know they work hard, but isn't that Yoder's vacation home? It was. Teasdale also knew 6 a.m. would be sleeping in for the notoriously busy Yoder, who owned 4 sawmills in neighboring Ashland County. He sighed. Again, he was reminded of how he had been appointed as a glorified mall cop to the rich and those who supported their need for an extra house. Why don't we take a look at the school bus? Teasdale reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of latex gloves. He pulled the door on the bus open. Amazing how these vehicles hadn't changed in his high school days in the early 90s. He stepped up to the driver's seat and examined a short stack of neatly folded clothes. Shirt, shorts, tighty-whities. The alligator hissed at him, clearly as upset as Teasdale and King to be up so early. The beast had a leash attached to one of the seats, but Teasdale did not want to stick around to see if it held. He jumped back down and pushed the door shut. You didn't piss yourself, did you? Asked King. Gator, said Teasdale. Big. He already had his phone out and thumbed his contacts. When the 911 dispatcher in Norwalk answered, he said, Found the school bus. and a big gator. He explained how the animal had been chained to a seat, but he scrambled off the bus to get away. Who puts an alligator on a bus? King asked. And where'd they get it? More importantly, asked Teasdale, who steals a school bus and dumps it in someone's front yard? He looked off to the side of the bus. A pair of ruts left by a smaller car cut into the soil between it and the road. He looked at King and shook his head. Whoever did it, they tore out of here in a hurry. Laying on the ground was a cigarette lighter. Picking up the lighter, he saw the logo for the Miami Marlins. Whoever it was, they're a fan of the Marlins. The dispatcher, a bored woman probably glad to get off the call from someplace other than Monticello, the large city to the north, mumbled, "Oh God, he's here." "Who's here?" Teasdale asked. "Someone from another planet?" "No," she said. "Florida man." The Florida Man Cometh. Deputy Stephanie Swanson responded, which made Teasdale frown. While he tired of the tug-of-war between the sheriff and the township police, it did not surprise him that township cops bagged off of dealing with an alligator hiding in a school bus. "Called the zoo," said Swanson when she got out of her cruiser. "They're sending a team, but they have to drive in from the city, so we have a half an hour." Who puts a gator on a bus? Not the first time that question had been asked all morning. He handed her a baggie with the lighter inside. "I believe more experienced law enforcement professionals call this a clue. The school district will send over a driver once the bus has been degatored." Teasdale led Swanson over to Rufus King, now dressed for a long day of gentrifying the city of Monticello, but patiently waiting to get the apex predator off his property. "Not exactly a quiet morning on the lake," said Teasdale. King shook his head. "I could have stayed in the city for this kind of drama. And what's this I hear about a Florida man?" Swanson had an iPad tucked under her arm and brought it up. "James Florin, age 48, of Gainesville, Florida. Went missing late last week. Wife thinks he went off on a drunk. There's a couple of drunken disorderly complaints in Gainesville and apparently Macon, Georgia. So our boy is either driving or going Greyhound. The search area is expanded to all of Florida and southern Georgia, and since Florin's got relatives here in Ohio, we got a bolo." "Still a bit excessive for a missing person with a couple drunken disorderlies," said Teasdale. "Most agencies would be glad to be rid of him. Is he mentally impaired or have some sort of condition?" Swanson scrolled and said, "Oh, and we're to let the Marion County Family Court know his whereabouts." She smiled. "Looks like somebody's getting divorce papers. They probably should have led with that." She handed Teasdale the iPad. He scrolled through the bulletin about Florin. He could be anywhere. A couple of relatives on the far side of Cleveland, and then there are the islands. Have we looked in a gutter in Put-in Bay? "Possible," said King, "but not likely, since the sheriff sends people over for the 2 weeks after the 4th. I know, one of my partners has a house on the island." "Well, the two from Cleveland are elderly aunts," said Swanson, "and years ago, Florin was busted a couple times with his cousin breaking into the old Buckland Lake Park. Said they wanted to walk the B-52 coaster." Teasdale laughed. "Is there enough of the B-52 left to even walk?" "Well, they tore parts of the coaster down back in the 90s, said King, "after all those arson fires." He absently straightened his tie when he mentioned arson. When both Swanson and Teasdale glared at him, he put his hands up. "Don't look at me. I was a toddler back then. The only thing I could burn down was our apartment building if I played with matches." "And did you?" asked Teasdale. "Juvenile record's clear on your 21st birthday. Isn't that right, Eric?" Teasdale cringed at the use of his first name. "Hate to think he drove all that way with the gator in the car or truck. Does the high school have another bus they can use for the football team's trip to Cedar Point today?" "Already made some phone calls," King said. "It's covered." "Of course you did," thought Teasdale. "All the goodwill money can buy." That's not fair. King had a dark past, but he'd been a good neighbor since buying the old farm here on the lake. "As soon as we get that beast off the bus, maybe we can dust it?" Do you know how many prints are on that school bus? asked Swenson. Why don't we follow the driver back to the high school? Maybe the principal will let us look at surveillance. Hopefully, said Teasdale. It's not as bad as the vape store's camera out in Mears Cove. Swenson smiled. Oh no, Eric. The high school cameras actually work. A large pickup with the logo for the Monticello Zoo rolled onto King's property. 2 men in khaki outfits climbed out, one carrying a handle with the loop of nylon on one end. He gestured at the school bus. In there? He's all yours, Teasdale said. We'll call the high school when you have it. Teasdale took a statement from King, which was not very helpful. How could it be when whoever stole the bus left it in the middle of the night? He would send Swenson a copy later. She snapped pictures of the tire tracks Teasdale had spotted before they could be trampled or run over. Teasdale left his car at King's place and rode with Swenson to the high school. Brandybuck High School lay in the middle of the 3 villages along Buckland Lake and had what Teasdale called a retro-futuristic look. It might have looked futuristic when it was built in the 80s. Now it just looked tacky. They found the principal, Walt Hurler, waiting for them near the bus garage. Mr. King is a lifesaver. He chartered a private shuttle to run the football team up to Cedar Point for the day. Couldn't you use one of the other buses? asked Teasdale. I know you've cut back on transportation, but not that much. Well, number 57 was the only one not down for maintenance, said Hurler. Since we only have 4, we try to keep one up in case one of the coaches or teacher plans a field trip in the off-season, and we've rented them out occasionally. Was the 57 rented out? Well, Swenson stepped around Teasdale, making sure her badge caught the sunlight. Mr. Hurler, I know the school board might be upset with you if you loaned the bus out, but it's better to admit it now than have it come out later. It's not the crime, Teasdale mused to himself. It's the cover-up. One of my poker buddies had some friends in from out of town, Hurler admitted. He wanted to use it for a fishing trip. I told him if he let the driver, Charlie Tobin, tag along, I'd lend him the bus. But it had to come back in pristine condition. He frowned. What's this I hear about a gator on my bus? Are we going to have to redo the interior? Ask the zoo guys, said Teasdale. Where's Tobin? Again, Hurler frowned, this time more deeply. To be honest, I haven't spoken to him this morning. When was the last time you had? asked Swenson. Hurler shook his head. Saturday morning, before he took the bus out. Swanson jotted that down on a notepad. And who was this poker buddy? Nate Keller, said Hurler. Teasdale and Swenson looked at each other, her look of horror reflecting his. Great, said Teasdale. I gotta go question the mayor of Mears Cove.
Alligator, not alligator. Was it an alligator?
It's an alligator.
Alligator on
not
a bus.
Not a crocodile.
It's like snakes on a train. Snakes on a plane. My bad. But
except I don't think the alligator can hide in like overhead compartments and
that's
stuff.
That's true.
I guess the babies can.
I was like, the babies can, but they're a lot less feisty.
Are they?
I mean,
aggressive?
I guess I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe
we live in Indiana.
Feisty.
Thankfully, we don't have gators here.
Well, we're going to Ohio tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we might run into one.
Do you remember when we visited your aunt down in Florida and we were walking through the park?
Wasn't there a gator in their pool?
It wasn't in a pool, it was a pond, but she was just like, oh yeah, it's just, and we're like, no, that's like a gator.
They said that they get some in their pool every once in a while, though, right? I could have sworn. And that's why they put up, there was like a fence. It was interesting. It was like a house extension around the pool because alligators kept going in there and like cooling off. And they decided they don't want gators chilling in their pool.
I guess like they don't think any more of them than we do of, potentially man-eating squirrels.
Yeah, I feel like they're not afraid of squirrels, though.
The gators or the Floridians?
Why would I be talking about the alligators? The Floridians.
I agree.
I don't know. What scary thing do we have up here?
What scary thing do we have?
We don't really have anything. We have foxes. I don't know if...
They're noisy.
Yeah, I don't think... I'm pretty sure there are still foxes in the south, though.
I think when you get out into
badgers?
more rural, I think we have some coyotes. I don't know if they go after people or if they're just going after animals.
They mostly go after animals. I've seen them kill a couple dogs around here, unfortunately.
I don't know if we have bears again when you get out into the forests. Certainly we don't
I
here.
don't think there's Indiana bears. I think there's, if you go out west a bit further, you'll run into them in like the Dakotas.
Okay, so we officially don't know what critters we have running around here.
We have tornadoes,
that could kill you.
I tell you what. We got tornadoes. Uh-huh. I don't know.
They got hurricanes in Florida.
Yeah, but you know what? We have dry hurricanes. It's nice.
It's nice.
We had a couple tornadoes touch down just south of us a couple of weeks ago. That was fun. It was like a short while where it was like 4 days in a row we had tornado warnings. It was not a great time.
Yeah, welcome to spring.
Yeah. Well, it always sucked because you'd have such a nice day. You know, it'd be 70 degrees. And then it's going to be followed by you having to sit in the basement overnight. And it always happened at night. I don't know why. We never had any daytime nados. They're always at night.
Maybe it's because, like, the temperature change comes with night and that's dawn. I don't know.
I assume, but still, we would have a nice warm day, a tornado overnight, and then it'd be cold in the morning.
I am liking the cold. I'm dreading the warm. I know.
You're dreading the warm?
It's hot, man. I think I may have to move north.
That's not exactly what I expected you to say. I'm pretty excited for it. I will say it was like 80 the other day, though, and I wasn't expecting it, and I was wearing long pants and everything. That was rough.
Yeah.
That was a rough day. All right, let's get back into it.
Let's get on with meeting His Honor the Mayor. Of the 3 villages along Buckland Lake, Muir's Cove had the least pretense. Only a couple of millionaires had weekend homes in its borders, and it somehow survived the death of Buckland Lake Amusement Park, the skeletal coaster mecca now sealed off, allegedly, by chain link fence and watched by cameras, most of which hadn't functioned since the beginning of the Iraq War. Many of the residents worked at the airport, for the railroads that crisscrossed Musgrave County, or the Ford plant over in Milan. Muir's Cove downtown, only 4 blocks long, consisted of 2 gas stations, an ever-shifting population of small shops, and 4 taverns. At Ballew's, the closest to the ruins of the amusement park, Mayor Keller held court. Must be nice to be able to work near a tap serving only craft loggers in the county, Teasdale said as he entered the bar, Swenson in tow. So, said Swenson, you hate IPAs too? Passionately. Eric Teasdale, said Keller, a man in his 50s with a bit of padding and a bristle of white hair. Well, it must be serious if my constable is bringing a lovely deputy to speak to me. Teasdale wanted to remind him he worked for the surrounding township. He let Swenson decide how to handle the lovely comment. We're here on business. We know about the school bus, Your Honor, Swenson added. Mr. Hurler told us he loaned it out to you on Saturday. Keller gave the pair his politician smile. Constable, deputy, it was just a harmless fishing trip. Nothing scandalous at all. Okay, maybe we didn't compensate the school district, but beyond that, no harm, no foul. Charlie brought us the bus with the full tank of gas, and I and my guests refilled it. Why? Was there some damage I don't know about? There was a gator on board, said Teasdale. Then a thought hit him. Your Honor, was one of your guests from Florida? Keller's face retained that smile, but it froze as though the lights went out behind it. Joe Reese's cousin came up from Florida. What was his name? Asked Swenson. It took Keller a moment to say, I don't know. Where's Reese now? Asked Teasdale. Probably at work. Law firm in downtown Monticello. He cocked his head. Wouldn't be surprised if he were in court right now. Was Reese's cousin named James Florin? Teasdale offered. The mayor shook his head. I honestly don't remember. I think Joe called him Jimmy, but I don't know. I do remember that this Jimmy was incredibly drunk when we left. Where did you leave from? The mayor grinned as a waitress placed a huge breakfast of eggs, bacon, potatoes, and pancakes, accompanied by a giant mug of dark beer. Constable, deputy, I'm afraid that's all the time I have. City business, you know. Teasdale wanted to point out that Mears Cove was a village, not a city. He might even have pointed out drinking on the clock was illegal, even for a mayor. But then that would have sounded like coming from a constable who worked on cars while enjoying a little off-license herb in his spare time. He and Swanson left. "Speaking of brunch," she said, "are you up for a little Waffle House?" The thought made his stomach turn. Then he asked, "Something happen at the Waffle House?" Let's head over to Milan and find out. Showdown at the Waffle House. The Waffle House in Milan had 3 kinds of clients. The bulk of customers worked at the Ford assembly plant and related businesses. Shift change meant heavy rushes early morning and evenings. Also, it kept the place going with the steady stream of supply truckers coming from Cleveland off the turnpike. A second group, seasonal, consisted of tourists looking for something familiar on their way to Cedar Point Amusement Park or the islands. These came in waves, usually from the south, most of them from Ohio, because who outside of Ohio, Michigan, or Ontario went to Lake Erie for an island getaway? The last group of regulars showed up mainly on weekends. People like Rufus King and other moneyed types out of Monticello and the swankier suburbs. They'd stop off on their way to Buckland Township with its quiet lake and rotting amusement park. Sure, the diner chain might be considered low class to these people, used to avocado toast and mimosas with their Sunday brunch. Yet many considered it fun to slum it. Some from new money simply stopped in out of habit. Teasdale avoided it as much as possible. In his days before his first constable gig in a simpler township near Cleveland, he'd gotten into fights and had bad encounters at such establishments, the experience not helped by hangover setting in. But at 9:30 this particular Monday morning, he had the novel experience of riding into the Waffle House lot in a police cruiser, not away from it. The handcuffs covered by his shirt also marked an improvement, as in past years, he'd ridden away wearing the cuffs. It didn't hurt sitting up front with Swanson either. "Are we conferring," he asked, "or just grabbing bad coffee?" "Honestly, I skipped breakfast," she said. "But there was an incident, and I thought your missing Florida man might be involved. We can eat while we talk to the manager." Teasdale opted for hash browns, scattered and covered. He didn't worry about such things as cholesterol and trans fat. That's what he paid a doctor for, when he bothered to see him. Swanson opted for coffee and toast. As they ate, she flagged down the manager. "Neil, you got a second?" Neil, a heavy man with tightly cropped gray hair, lumbered out of the kitchen with a vat of chili. He slid the metal container into a place behind the counter and headed over to their booth. "What's up, kitten?" "You smoothie," she said. "This is my friend Eric, who keeps an eye on the 3 villages along Buckland Lake." "Oh," said Neil, "the constable. Anyone stealing Rolexes from them fine country homes?" Teasdale gave a sarcastic laugh. "Yeah, ha ha. I'm actually looking for a Florida man." "In Ohio?" asked Neil. "Northern Ohio? Have you tried Cleveland? They're more touristy than us. I mean the Rock Hall, the losing football team." "What happened yesterday, Neil?" said Swanson. "The parking lot?" "Oh," said Neil, "that. You know how Nate Keller, the mayor of Mears Cove, does those fishing trips every weekend in the summer?" "Yeah," said Teasdale. "Where does he go?" "Where else? The lake." The lake could mean Buckland Lake or Lake Erie, but Teasdale assumed Neil meant Buckland. "Well, that narrows it down to 10 miles of water. Was he here yesterday?" "He wasn't," said Neil, "but his friend, Larry Molnick, he was." "Who?" "The sales manager at the car dealership at the Crawford County line." Teasdale knew of the dealership, but not Molnick. It was a service department who often helped him source parts for his restoration projects. "What happened?" Neil frowned. "What happened is Larry and this guy I've never seen before rolled up in a school bus. A school bus. Larry and his pal walked in and ordered a late breakfast. Then Larry gets into an argument with another customer. I tossed Larry and his buddy out, since Larry was clearly drunk. Out in the parking lot, one of them headbutts a customer's windshield, and then they take off in the bus." Did you see whose head did the butting? asked Swenson. I was in back, Neil said, so I only saw the aftermath. But from the crack in the guy's windshield, someone's got a head of a hell of a concussion. Couldn't have been Larry. He's never been violent. Uh-huh, thought Teasdale. And no, officer, those aren't my drugs. He'd been on both sides of that conversation enough times, though the witnesses saying it added a wrinkle. And they left in the school bus? Said they were going back to the lake, said Neil. Something about riding the B-52. Teasdale and Swenson looked at each other. The amusement park. Oh, one more thing, said Teasdale. Did you hear or see anything about a gator on a bus? Neil burst out laughing. No, but I want to know when you get the whole story. They were riding around with a gator on that bus? It was on a leash, Swenson deadpanned. How did you get this gig again? asked Swenson. Because you're the most uncop-like cop I've ever met. They rode in her cruiser down Buck Lake Pike, the road that hugged the south shore of the lake. Their route had brought them through the Tony Buckland-on-the-Lake village, through the more affordable Brandy Buck, to the seedy Mears Cove. Mears Cove actually had more businesses, but seemed anchored by the remains of the amusement park, or maybe bogged down by them. I was a private detective in Medina County about 20 years ago, he said. They have a lake like this one and its own decaying amusement park ruins. The township there got into an argument with the sheriff about who had jurisdiction along the lake. The township thought it cut into their speed trap revenue if the sheriff deputies came in and did actual policing. They compromised, and someone decided I would make a great constable. The fools. So how did you end up here, she asked as they turned onto a side road. Mirror Cove, of all places, approached me, said Teasdale. The township seems to neglect the villages because they're not very good speed traps, and the rich people in Buckland-on-the-Lake don't want township cops here. The villages can't afford to hire more than 2 or 3 officers between them, so they cut a deal with the sheriff to patrol here and a constable to oversee it all. Moi. Sweet gig, she said. Teasdale shrugged. Mostly, I work on restoring muscle cars. A lot easier up here than down by Medina. The side street approached the lake and turned into a crumbled asphalt path. Some of it turned to gravel or dust. Swenson guided the cruiser through the abandoned parking lot of Buckland Lake Amusement Park. My dad said he saw Devo here before they broke it big, said Swenson, right before the park closed. Teasdale whistled. Wow, that's over 40 years ago. Did Led Zeppelin play here? Swenson looked at him like he just asked if the earth was flat. Does this look like American City Bank Arena? They got out of the car. Teasdale had a key to the property. His duties included walking the ancient park once a week to look for squatters and drug stashes. A voice called out, "Help!" Teasdale and Swenson went into a jog, followed the sound of the voice. They rounded the corner of the old ticket booth, now gray and peeling with age, and they found a bald, naked man sitting in a trash can.
That sounds like quite the sight. It sounds like Detective Connolly, if you ask me.
It does sound like Detective Connolly.
Crazily enough, that seems like a joint he would stick around in.
Yeah, maybe you and Jim should get together and go
He
out
was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recently. Wasn't that
Detective Connolly?
Yeah, that was like the second episode I did. Well, I don't think it was actually the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
No, you used it though as a...
It was like a Bass Pro Shop for guitars.
Yeah.
It was a pyramid.
Yes.
So the Tennessee... Right? Yeah, the Tennessee Bass Pro Shop, not just a regular old Bass Pro Shop. I'm talking about
the one in Memphis.
The Memphis pyramid, you know?
Yes.
Because in America, we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Bass Pro Shop. We don't have, Giza and those pyramids. So, we're winning. We only have them in the Midwest, though.
How did you know we haven't covered everywhere?
You're right. I should go look for pyramids out west.
And I think Memphis is in the Mid-South. It's not the Midwest.
Okay, well, it's like Okay, I guess there's Kentucky between us. All right, fine, I'm wrong. Nonetheless.
All right. Well, here's good advice for everyone. Don't stand too close to the naked man. Where the hell are your clothes? Asked Teasdale. He saw a broad expanse of skin that sunlight never touched. the man moaned, red ringing his eyes. I think over by that place in Brandybuck? God, I feel... He ran his hand over his head. The widening of his eyes told Teasdale this was the first time he noticed his hair was gone. Oh, man, I'm never doing mushrooms again. So you left your clothes over on Rufus King's front lawn with the gator. Teasdale went over to him and put his hand on the man's shoulders. Why don't you wait until some officers get here? They can cover you with a blanket. You're the constable, the naked man said. Didn't you bring one? Teasdale sighed. I left it in my car with the Walther PPK in the ejection seat. Someone losing a school bus got me out of bed early. Help! Came the voice again. Teasdale motioned for Swenson to follow, and the sound of the yelling. They plunged through a knot of trees to find one of the freestanding hills from the late lamented B-52 coaster. Approximately halfway up sat a 1977 AMC Pacer. One, Teasdale realized, he'd seen picking up parts at the same dealer where Molnick worked. We need to call that in, see if Callahan Chevrolet is missing that Pacer that fits in front of the dealership next to the old Studebaker. What's a Studebaker? Asked Swenson. Teasdale rolled his eyes and shook his head. Kids. Poking his head out of the car, the man cried out again, Help! He startled when he realized Teasdale and Swenson stood on the ground. Where the hell have you guys been? I've been screaming for hours. 10 minutes later, Teasdale had the Pacer man down from his bizarre perch, but not the car. Assuming the coaster section didn't collapse, they'd need a crane to retrieve it. The man was in slightly better shape than his naked companion. His complexion was pale beneath his deep suntan. When asked how he got the car halfway up the hill, he said, magic mushrooms. When asked what he would have done when he discovered the rest of the track had collapsed along with the banking industry, he said he would have crashed, like the banking industry. Teasdale escorted him back to the ticket booth, where the once naked man sat scowling, now wrapped in a blanket, and leaning back against the trash can, hands cuffed behind his back. This is all your fault, he snapped. Well, that's two of them, said Teasdale. Where's the third? By now, the township cops had arrived. Still hasn't told us who he is, said one officer. Not sure he knows. Well, Teasdale asked, giving the Pacer man an unfriendly jerk. Start talking. Swenson and another officer marched off toward the abandoned restrooms. Moments later, they came out with a third man. This one had a knot on his head, dried blood crusted above his eyebrows. Guess this answers who headbutted the car, said Swanson. To the newcomer, she said, That is one massive unicorn horn. What did you do? Long story, said the unicorn man, mumbling as he straggled to stay on his feet. Okay, but who's who? Teasdale glared at the Pacer man, clearly the most coherent of the three. And how did you get that gator aboard the bus? All right, Jack, we've reached the deliberation.
Alrighty.
All right, so Teasdale's early morning response to an abandoned school bus has turned into a scavenger hunt for a Florida man gone AWOL. So which of the three party animals is the missing Florida man, James Florin? So you have Trash Can Man, who is now unnaturally bald, Unicorn Man, who bounced his head off at least one windshield, and Pacer Man, who managed to get a car stuck on a roller coaster.
Wow, this is quite the collection of individuals.
Would you like to hear the facts as Teasdale sees them?
Of course.
A school bus and driver were borrowed from the school district by Mayor Nate Keller for a fishing party on Saturday. To Keller's knowledge, the bus was returned with a full tank of gas. The school bus wasn't returned to the school district, but left on Rufus King's lawn. The driver, Charlie Tobin, is missing.
So Charlie's probably one of the three.
Searching the bus, Teasdale discovers a stack of neatly folded clothes on the driver's seat and an annoyed alligator chained in the aisle.
Interesting. Okay.
Before being abandoned, the bus was parked at the Waffle House. The manager said a drunk Larry Molnick, a sales manager for a local car dealer, came in with a man he didn't know. The manager tossed Molnick out for fighting. Either Molnick or the stranger headbutted a windshield before leaving in the bus.
Okay. Alrighty. Sounds good.
Teasdale and Detective Swenson received a bolo on Florida man James Florin. The recently AWOL husband has family in Ohio, including now respected attorney Joe Reese. As teens, though, Florin and Reese were busted for breaking into the amusement park to climb the B-52 coaster.
All right. That explains where the inspiration came from.
Inside the closed amusement park, Teasdale and Swenson discovered a naked man in a trash can. He was pale, white, and newly bald.
Interesting. Okay.
Next, they found a man trapped in a pacer stuck on the B-52 coaster. He was pale beneath his tan complexion.
I don't know what that means. He's tan or pale?
He's tan. You would know it if you saw it on somebody who's sick. Like, normally, no matter what color your skin is, you'll have, tan, like, rosy cheeks.
Just, like,
yeah.
Really? Okay. All right.
Lastly, Swenson discovered a man in one of the bathrooms. He had a bloody black and blue bump in the middle of his forehead.
Ouch.
So Jack, which is the Florida man, cometh.
Okay. Well, if you ignore the dogs barking in the background, we can get down to business. Sorry, that's my puppy. She's not very well behaved. Okay.
How do you want to do this?
So the trash can man.
Yes.
What's his deal? Is he drunk? Is he feeling anything?
They're pretty much all not drunk, but they've all been doing mushrooms. So they've
all been doing mushrooms.
They are all incapacitated.
Okay.
They said the pacer man was the most coherent of the three of them.
All right. So let's take a look at this. The guy with the blood on his face, that dude, there's a 50-50 shot it's him. We know that the Florida guy was with
Larry Molnick.
Larry.
Yep.
So the question is he Larry or is he the Florida man?
Yep.
Who is, what's Florence?
Yeah,
that guy.
Florin.
Okay. I feel like if I thought about this, the author definitely put enough clues for me to get this right.
As I'm reading this to you, I almost feel like this is one of those logic puzzles where you just need a grid to, like, check off the clues versus the people.
Okay. And then who was it that wanted to climb the B-52 really badly? That wasn't the Florida man, was it?
It was the Florida man who wanted to climb the 52.
Well,
because he had done it with his cousin.
The man who's currently on the B-52, if it's him, it would make sense why he did it, because he really wanted to. And also, he's tan, which would explain, because he's from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I'd explain that. So the three people that are there, one's probably Charlie Tobin, the bus driver, right?
One is the bus driver.
One is Larry Molnick,
the sales manager for the car dealer. And one is James Florin, the Florida man.
Well, it explains how they might have gotten the car. It doesn't explain who would be driving it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Any of them could be driving it.
Anybody could be driving it.
Gee. So there's Pacer Man in the car, there's Trash Can Man, and who's the other one?
Unicorn Man, the guy who headbutted.
Oh, that's right. Where did they find him? The bathroom?
Yes.
I don't know if that's relevant or not, the fact that he's in a bathroom. Can you read through all the clues one more time?
Yes, let me, I'll try to skip the background ones.
Okay.
Searching the bus, Teasdale discovered a stack of neatly folded clothes on the driver's seat and an annoyed alligator chained in the aisle.
Neatly folded clothes. Okay, and the bald man is naked.
Bald man is naked.
Okay, I would assume that's Charlie Tobin then.
Okay.
So we're going to say bald man is Charles.
Okay. The manager said, the Waffle House manager said a drunk Larry Molnick, sales manager for the local car dealer, was kicked out for fighting, came in with the stranger. As you said before, either Molnick or the stranger had butted a windshield before leaving in the bus.
Okay, so it's one of those two. It's either, the bloodied man is either, Larry or him, and the other is Pacer Man. Okay.
Okay. As kids, Florin and his cousin, Joe Reese, who's now the attorney, were busted for breaking in the amusement park to climb the B-52 coaster.
Okay. That one doesn't exactly explain who might have been the one to do it, but it explains why they are all there.
And so let's see. Inside the closed park, Teasdale and Swenson discovered a naked man in the trash can. He was pale white and newly bald.
So it's not Charlie.
So I'm gonna write Charlie.
I'm gonna put him down as the big old C, Charlie Cardinal.
Next, they found a man trapped in the Pacer car, stuck on the B-52 coaster. He was pale beneath his tan complexion.
That one's probably Florence.
Okay. And then lastly, Swenson discovered a man in one of the bathrooms. He had a bloody black and blue bump in the middle of his forehead.
Bloody black and blue bump. That's a fun phrase to say.
Yeah, and I'm proud of myself for not tripping over it.
I would have said bloody black and blue bump. Anyway, I think given all of our resources with the tan and the craving of the B-52 walk along, it probably is Florence who's stuck in the Pacer. Okay. Which is funny because a Pacer is also the name for like the Indiana team. Yep. But they're not from Indiana. Bummer.
So then you're putting Molnick as the unicorn?
Molnick as the bloody man, yeah.
All right. Before we get into the big reveal, I want to let people know that if you haven't seen it yet, the anthology for this half of the season is available. It is called Larceny and Lies. Check it out. It has all the stories from the first one here through episode 12, which will be Jack's story. Do you remember the title of your story?
No.
It's Detective Connolly Gets Down and Dirty.
Gets Down and Dirty, that's right.
And that will drop in June. Cockfighting.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
If you know people who prefer to read their mysteries, and if you want them to have a chance at solving these themselves, pick up the ebook or the print copy. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere that ebooks and print books are sold. All right, now for the big reveal. I wouldn't have gone along. Some of them should have known better, like the mayor, Trash Can Man said. Mayor? asked Teasdale. Of Mears Cove, the Trash Can Man said. Another police cruiser blooped its siren back down the path. Teasdale could see it through the fence where they stood. 2 officers flanked Mayor Keller, and a man in a 3-piece suit were more than Swenson's car. Your Honor? asked Swenson when they joined the group. Who's your friend? This is Joe Reese, said Keller, the one whose cousin is missing. By the way, what's I hear now about a warrant on him? What's the charge? Being a Florida man in Ohio, said Teasdale. Only it seems the Florida men are doing most of the Florida man stuff. He gestured to the trash can man shivering in the blanket. Keller looked the man over. I'm sure you recognize Charlie Tobin despite his new look. Good God, son, what the hell happened to you? Mushrooms, said Tobin, and then pointed at Reese. That guy's cousin brought magic mushrooms. Joe Reese began to laugh until Swenson asked him, what's so funny? I'm sure you probably found out we got busted in our college days for trying to ride the B-52. Jimmy brought mushrooms that time. This is funny. Almost worth getting pulled out of Judge Mankiewicz's courtroom. I thought anything was worth getting away from Judge Mankey, Swenson quipped. Are you James Florin? asked Teasdale of the Unicorn Man. That's not Florin, said Keller. That's Larry Molnick.
I got it, suckers. That's right. The tan got me.
Mr. Mayor, said Molnick, did you get your gator back? Sorry we left it on the school bus. Swenson turned to Keller and said, Your gator, eh? The mayor shrugged sheepishly. I may have omitted that part. I mean, I borrowed a school bus without the board's permission. James Florin, asked Teasdale, as pacerman. Did you know they put an Amber Alert out for you in Florida and southern Georgia? Reese scowled at his cousin and sneered, What the hell, Jimmy? We're not 21 anymore. Before Florin could respond, Swenson stepped into his path. James Florin, I am to inform you that you will be served when you are taken to Norwalk. Seems your wife wants to serve you with divorce papers. Damn it, said Florin. The 3 of you are under arrest for trespassing to start. Swenson waved the township cops over. And Mr. Molnick, if they can get that pacer off the coaster without any damage, your now former employers will not press charges of grand theft auto. Molnick moaned and seemed to fall asleep between Swenson and the township cop who helped her. She shrugged and turned to Teasdale. We'll let him know when we get him awake. Reese shook his head. Come on, Jimmy. I'll get you out on bail and we can sort all this out back at the house. In the meantime, Teasdale scribbled out a ticket and handed it to Keller. What's this? Asked the mayor. Possession of an exotic animal without a permit, said Teasdale. Keller went to tear it up. Said Teasdale. Do that, and Deputy Swenson will have to write it up. If I do it, you'll go to mayor's court. Not yours, but over in Brandybuck. I'm sure you and Mayor Dowland can work out an arrangement to sweep it under the rug. If Swenson does it... Yeah, said Reese. That's common pleas if it's the sheriff, and you'll end up with Judge Mankey and get 30 days in the electric chair. Keller stuffed the ticket in his pocket. You're lucky I don't fire you. Actually, said Teasdale, you're lucky. I believe failing to secure a vicious animal is a felony, one even your mayoral status can't avoid. He and Swenson walked back to her car. I got a question. Florin is from Florida, but it's the Ohio man doing all the weird stuff. Why is that? Well, said Teasdale, Florin did try to drive a car up a crumbling coaster. But Ohio men, Florida men, is there really a difference? The end.
Wow, way to insult Ohio at the end there. I was going to make the same joke, though, so I don't really find that
So this story kind of came out of Jim and I were emailing back and forth, and I don't know how we got on the topic of outrageous things, and I was sharing the Florida man, the myth dimension that it is that you and your brother taught me about. And so then we were going back and forth just sharing a Florida man. And one included a woman driving a pickup truck that had a full-grown man in the back.
In the bed, yeah.
In a dog cage.
Oh, very interesting.
And so it was some of it, just as Jim was like finishing the story, there was one about a gator.
Well, there's probably a lot about gators down there.
It was hysterical. I can't remember what it was now about the gator, but he's like, damn, they beat me to it.
Unfortunately.
So really fun story. I guess you were right. He really did a nice job kind of seeding those little clues.
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on it, but of course it was the bus driver and the naked man whose clothes were in the bus.
Yeah, well, that's what I said earlier with the second you said that there were clothes in the bus. And I was like, well, only one guy without clothes, and it's placed precariously in the one place that Tobin would be driving.
So, I debated with this one a little bit because sort of officially missing persons isn't a crime, but this is anything but murder, right?
I mean, it's also trespassing, right?
Well, it was trespassing, but that was the actual one they got charged with. I decided, though, to share some information about missing persons.
Okay.
So since 1975, the FBI has maintained the National Crime Information Center, missing persons and unidentified persons statistics. So according to the 2023 statistics report, this is very cool. There's a lot to unpack here, but the files are retained indefinitely until a person is either located or the record is canceled by the entering agency. So data is collected on missing persons with disabilities, and that includes senility, missing persons where circumstances indicate that the disappearance was non-voluntary or that the person's physical safety is in danger, missing persons where catastrophe was involved, so earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, and specifically where juveniles are involved. So as of December 31st, 2023, the NCIC contained 96,955 active missing person records. Within that calendar year, 2023, over 563,000 records were entered, and nearly the same number were cleared off. So it said that a number of these are cleared very quickly, with people returning home or people being found. Of the active files, 30% were juveniles under 18, and additional 9% were young people between 19 and 21, leaving 60% of the missing persons for adults over 21. I guess there is an optional field that people can fill out about the circumstances. Where that was filled out, 95% were coded as runaways. Less than 1%, 0.9%, were attributed to non-custodial parent kidnappings, and only 0.1% were coded as abducted by strangers. Just based on the fact that 95% were coded as runaways, at least implies that that field was primarily filled out for juveniles.
Yeah.
So some very interesting standards. I don't know if I was surprised at the 500,000 number at being large or small for our country of over 300 million people. But yeah, I thought too it was interesting that the numbers as true abducted by strangers was a very small percent of the missing person fields. All right, so we talked a little bit about Jim Winter. Allow me to introduce him. So he is the author of the Holland Bay series and the Nick Kepler novels. Jim is a crime fiction persona of the science fiction author T.S. Hoddle. As T.S., he writes the Compact Universe series and the Suicide Arc. Additionally, he is a freelance editor who does work for Down and Out Books, and you can find him at jimwinterbooks.com. T.S. Hoddle, I'll put all of the links in the show notes, but yes, Jim/T.S. Does excellent world building. I've really enjoyed his books, so give him a try. Whether you like mysteries, look for Jim Winter, or you're a science fiction crossover reader, then it's T.S. Hoddle. So that wraps up this episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support the show by subscribing, telling a mystery lover about us, giving us a 5-star review. Remember to check out our new website, m2d4podcast.com. There we have links to the season's authors, directly into the podcast URL, as well as some background on the authors. Mysteries to Die For is hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. The Florida Man Cometh was written by Jim Winter. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for a Toe Tag, which is the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, or thriller genre, and then come back in 2 weeks for our next original story, where intellectual espionage is the featured murderless crime. It's Hoodwinked and Bamboozled by me, TG Wolff. All right, Jack, take us out.